and principles?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jean. And yes, so civility saves lives is, I guess, a kind of the umbrella of the work that's being done, and within it there are a number of different tools and approaches, and calling it out with compassion is one of those kind of key approaches. So it's very much under the Civility Saves Lives umbrella, and we're keen to start looking at, obviously in a sustainable way, but Helen Freeman, who's our Director of Medical Education and leading on this, is doing a lot of work with Chris Turner from Civility Saves Lives, and with the work stream we've put in place to really get those to get that approach tested out, and us understanding how we can roll it out across Ireland.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. I have Sarah and Gaynor waiting to ask questions. Maybe if we get the two questions and Adam, maybe if we take all three, yeah, and then you can respond to these, Fiona. Sarah.
Thank you, Boyd. Obviously, this is an area of particular interest for me, and there's a lot of things that I could talk about, but luckily we'll get the chance to go into more detail at our next staff governance meeting. But just a couple of things. Firstly, I just wanted to commend everybody, not just at this level, but all the, the cultural oversight group and all the people that are working in all the different groups underneath that. I think the fact that this is continuing to be pushed forward despite those pressures that you talked about, Fiona, I think is absolutely fantastic, and it just demonstrates the commitment that I think is evident across the organisation to moving this forward. So I think that's amazing. One question I had is actually about the Guardian service. I realise we're not there yet, but I wondered kind of what the thoughts are around an exit strategy. So obviously that's provided by an external provider, and we've seen really positive outcomes from that, including extending that out to council colleagues in Argyll and Bute, which I think is really positive. But just wondering what the early thoughts are, about an exit strategy and what capacity we might need to think about to address that. And then my second question is specifically about whistleblowing. On page 33, there's a definition of whistleblowing, and it talks about the importance of having some clarity around that, and making sure that people are clear on what whistleblowing is and isn't, and what the correct processes are for that. One slight concern I have is that there will obviously be times where a situation may arise where actually isn't clearly one or the other, and it maybe sits across the, two issues. There is maybe a whistleblowing element, and also another element that needs to be picked up through people processes. And I suppose I'm just looking for a little bit of assurance that we recognise that might occur, and that we have safeguards in place to make sure that we don't lose those situations through the cracks, as it might be. We're not in a situation where an incident is getting, bounced backwards and forwards between, is it whistleblowing or is it a grievance, and that we've got something that can catch that. I guess that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Gaynor.
Thank you. And thank you, Fiona, for the presentation. My question is also about the Guardian service, specifically on page 31 in the last paragraph. You say there that 5% of calls to the Guardian service are about patient quality and safety issues, and I just wondered how they've been dealt with, or if escalated. So for example, are they forwarded to the clinical governance team in order that we're aware of those issues and can do something about them?
Thanks, Gaynor. Adam.
Thanks, Boyd. Poor Fiona, quite a wide range of questions. I suppose my question is around kind of pace of change and linked to the issues that have been highlighted in the report about organisational capacity. I mean, certainly, I kind of take your point, Fiona, about culture being a long-term change, but equally there are people kind of impatient to see change and feeling that we maybe haven't progressed as far as we should have, and that they're not necessarily seeing a change at local level. And for me, I think we've got a large number of very appropriate actions and work streams kind of almost ready to go, but not necessarily making a change yet that people want to see on the ground. So I suppose, as I say, my question really is about, have we got the organisational capacity, and are we going fast enough to make a change in our culture where that is needed?
Okay, Fiona, do you want to respond to these three?
Yeah, I'll go for it. Thank you. And this is always a test of whether I can read my own writing by the time I get to the end of this. So, yeah, to start with Sarah's questions, the Guardian Service, we have, I think with the Guardian Service, off the top of my head, I think we expect that to be in place for at least a sort of 2 to 3 year period. But absolutely, the Guardian Service themselves would say almost that the success sometimes of their work is that actually you almost don't hardly need them anymore. I think for us it was very important that we have that independence and that capacity to focus on this. And I think certainly I would be thinking it would, sort of, this is probably a 3, we're coming towards the halfway through the first year. I think it probably is a bit of a 3-year strategy in any event. And one of the value that we've seen coming through from the Guardian Service isn't just about the formal process for escalating concerns, which is really helpful, and will help address Gainer's point. But I think actually, sort of one of the biggest things that we've seen is that in people reaching out to the Guardian Service and having a conversation about a concern, that is in itself helping an awful lot of people to be happy with what they've done, or to understand what they want to take forward, or just the fact they've talked it through and they've realised that actually either things are okay or they know what to do about it. That value is huge, because where we see those people not feeling they have that avenue, that's where concerns build and build and build and end up in a formal process. And we know that's always much more challenging to get a resolution to. Because it's a sort of linked point, I'll mention Gainer's query there. So yes, because the Guardian Service's remit does cover a wide range of things, and that there is a really robust agreed framework that the Guardian Service use depending on the type of concern and the sort of seriousness of it, and they award these concerns a red, amber or green status, and that defines where in the organisation it's escalated to and to what extent, how quickly we need to respond to it, which for a red concern, which may well be something like a serious patient or quality issue, would be within 24 hours, and that escalation process is very rapid and comes in at the right level of the organisation for people to be able to do something. So that's the sort of mechanism for reporting that. And obviously we have regular conversations with the Guardian Service to make sure that we're understanding, as well as the feedback and the escalation, the sort of broader issues that we're seeing. On the second point around the definition of whistleblowing and making sure things don't fall through the cracks, that's absolutely key. I think what are whistleblowing, I guess, at its simplest is where somebody feels unable to, or hasn't, or has raised and has not had addressed a concern around one of some specific groups. And so when questions come into us that could be whistleblowing concerns, I think one of the things we look at is whether or not there is a process available to us that the individual is willing for us to address it through. So while somebody might believe they have a whistleblowing concern, and we can always escalate something into that, often when a complaint comes in, actually if we can engage the right senior leaders to do a formal review of what the concern is and to commit to reporting back to both the people that were involved in the complaint being raised on the progress and outcome, I think that allows us to make sure that we've covered it off, and that would always be our key. One of the things that the INWO will always talk about is that they have to do a check when concerns come into them to make sure that it's clear that it is something that both is within the right kind of subject area, but also that there's a clear kind of there isn't an internal grievance process, for example, that's more appropriate to be used. In terms of the question, I think I've covered off those questions, and now just Adam's around the pace of change, and I do think this is it is a challenge, and I think we always want to do things as quickly as we can, but also make sure that we're doing the right things, and that is a delicate balance. I think part of what I talked about at the start of the meeting around engaging with colleagues to make sure they understand what culture change is all about will help us with this, because while it's really helpful if people have a specific issue they're experiencing, that's something that we can address. And that's something, whether that's through supporting leadership, through changing, through having conversations to manage expectations. But we do get quite a lot of generic feedback about people saying, well, things aren't changing, I'm not seeing anything different. And I think for us, we've absolutely got to listen to that, but it needs to be, people need to be telling us what it is that hasn't changed, so that we can make sure that we're supporting them to change. So I think I would, we've got lots of channels, and we've recently started an NHS Highland listening email as well, just to give people another route in to raise comments or kind of make suggestions about things that could be better. So I think it's absolutely important that we do keep progressing, and we've now got quite a robust programme plan in place for some of the key tools and activities we're rolling out. But I do also think we've probably all got a responsibility as well to just challenge a little bit when people say nothing's different. We have to say, well, what can you do differently? What can we do to help you do things differently?
Okay. Thanks, Fiona. I have Susan waiting to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief observation as someone who's participating in my very first board meeting. I just wanted to say how obvious it is to me that this entire board operates in an authentic way that underpins this cultural change you're seeking to drive through. So it's very refreshing to see that is evident through the whole way in which I've seen the board operating so far, and you're all to be commended for that. That was just my observation.
Thank you, Susan. It's encouraging to know that you've had that perception of the board at this early stage. I wonder if Bert, you would like to come in and say something about your intentions regarding Argyll. Bert is our whistleblowing champion, and we share Bert with NHS Grampian, and that could have been perceived as a negative, but in fact it's a very positive thing, because he brings to us the benefits of his interactions in Grampian and his perception of the activity in terms of culture in another board area, which is a very useful comparison to have. Bert.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll touch on these things just in a moment, but just to build, I suppose, on some of what Fiona's been saying, and is that there is a lot of work going on, and there are so many opportunities there for people to be aware of what is being done. But I think the thing that's encouraging me, and I've been seeing it over this past 2 or 3 months, is that all of the preparatory work that has been taking place over a period of time is now becoming to come together, and we see the areas of priority work that have been described, and as we've already heard, culture is not going to change overnight, but we've all got a responsibility to try and make that change. And it's not as simple as just, well, here's a start date for the culture to change. It's not like switching on a light. It's something that has to be worked at and will take a period of time. But I can see the foundations being put in place for all of that to take place. I think in terms of the whistleblowing specifically, Boyd touched upon it in my dual role with Grampian, and I think that does bring benefits. And we've been able to adopt a collaborative sharing approach, which has been in evidence over the past number of months. And I think that shared and collaborative approach will continue to reap benefits as we move forward. I've been paying specific attention to Argyll and Bute over this past period of time, and had it not been for the stricter restrictions under which we're all living and operating in just now, I would have been in Argyll and Bute by now, and again had other visits planned for the forthcoming weeks. That hasn't been possible in physical terms, but I will be making these visits virtually, and there is an itinerary being drawn up on my behalf, probably as we're speaking just now. I very much look forward to that, and I've had lots of discussions with Joanna. I've spoken also with others who represent Argyll and Bute to try and get this temperature check of Argyll and Bute. And I know that there's been a lot of very positive work taking place there. I know there is also a feeling that there are some legacy issues which we need to try and address. And I know that the root cause work that's going to be undertaken by Emma Pickard, together with my approach to it, may allow us to get some greater insight into what are these legacy issues that are still causing people concern. The whistleblowing standards and their implementation are a big piece of work. I think we need to be quite clear in relation to that, and trying to deal with that under the present constraints where staff are working under a great deal of pressure will not be easy. The implementation date for the standards are the 1st of April. How achievable that is going to be, I think, remains to be seen, and it's something that we just need to continue working towards. But there is a lot going on in relation to the whistleblowing. There's an intrinsic link with the whole culture programme, and I'm encouraged with all that I've been seeing over this past period of time. So hopefully that provides some update and indeed assurance to colleagues in relation to the work that's taking place. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. And I think I don't see any other contributors wanted to come in just now. So just to thank Fiona for leading us through the culture update. Just to reflect on how multi-layered, multifaceted, multidimensional all of this is, and that it is, as somebody indicated, something for the long term. It's a long haul. There is no short-term fix here. There is a past to be dealt with. There is a present to deal with and to engage with, and what we're really interested in is what is going to happen in the future going ahead. And we are laying the foundations for that, I hope. And I hope that is apparent to all who are interested in this area. There are questions, obviously, about pace of change and impatience to see things happening and things being different on the ground. There are issues around capacity at a time when there are so many pressures on the system, particularly through the COVID and the vaccination. But we are determined to see this through. And thank you, Fiona, for leading us on that journey today. Okay, we move forward to the winter plan and go over to Louise for this.
Hiya. Again, I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to go through this at huge length because I'm aware that a draft came to the September board, and this is primarily for the board to hopefully approve the plan, which has been already reported and noted by the Scottish Government and adopted by them, and we have been feeding updates on that. We will also be subsequently doing our remobilisation plan, very much linked to this. Just a few areas to be focusing on. There's already a lot of work gone on the enhanced community services I mentioned. The Flow Navigation Centre and the Mental Health Assessment Unit are already up and running. So some key to-dos within the plan are already well underway, and I'm more than happy to take any questions on any other aspect of the plan.
Okay, Pam, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just to add to Louise, because this looks a bit out of kilter now, but we had anticipated at the sign off of this, because of timings would go through clinical governance. That wasn't able to happen. So as you can see, it's already been accepted and commented on by Scottish Government and is already happening. So it is just to formally adopt the plan as was set out earlier in the year.
Okay, comments or questions, Alex?
Thanks, Boyd. Yeah, it was just following up from Pam's question, was that, you know, that we need to think about in future where they should go, where this kind of plan should go before it comes to the board. And yeah, clinical governance is fine, but I would also suggest that the financial source and performance should have it, at least should see it. Rather, because some of the performance indicators that we will require in the process will come out of this type of plan. So can I ask in future that it comes to both, not just to one? Thanks.
And could I invite Sarah and then Gaynor to make contributions and then to go back to Louise for answers?
Thank you, Boyd. It's just a question about single-handed GP practices. I suppose I'm thinking specifically about our island communities where we have single-handed GP practices. Have we had to put any additional safeguards in place to support them in light of the additional risks around COVID? And I'm thinking about, you know, if a GP has to self-isolate very quickly, have we had to put anything in place to support the community in that instance?
Okay.
Maybe leave that one, and Louise, you can come back in a moment. Gaynor, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that we'd be happy at clinical governance to take any concerns or issues relating to the winter plan with regard to quality and patient and safety of our services. And so they can be escalated at any time to clinical governance by exception reporting. And just to flag up that our next meeting is on the 4th of March. So my expectation is that the next winter plan will come to Clinical Governance Committee in September 2021 before submission to Scottish Government. But I agree with what Alex has said. My specific question is that the checklist appendix for the winter plan, when that was done, a number of the checklists were amber. I think we had one red. I just wondered, I'm assuming that they've now progressed to green.
Okay, Louise, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, okay. In relation to the first point about additional support, there have been some elements where we've tried to do some of that, particularly with advanced nurse practitioner roles, etc. However, I wouldn't be able to answer that more detail for the wider time of COVID, because I've only been in this post since back end of last year, so I don't know for the whole period of COVID, but certainly in recent times we've tried to look at what we can do across areas to support where needed. From a care point of view, I don't think we've had any particular hotspots where it's been problematic, other than the usual pressures that we do have. There hasn't been anything specifically COVID related. And in terms of the actions, absolutely, we've been working through those. I'd need to send you an updated version with where we are now on those, because there will be a small number that are still being worked through and aren't completely finalised, but there's certainly a number of them that have turned green since this was done.
Okay, we're being asked, getting some echo here. We're being asked to approve the winter plan. Are you happy to do so? Okay, can we move on? Thanks, Louise. Can we move on to some of the reports now, and I think we're staying with you, Louise, for the public bodies annual performance reports and the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership report.
Yeah, this is actually basically to say that we haven't as yet got a report to submit to the board. We are still finalising the health and social care report for North Highland, and it wasn't really in a position where we felt it was ready to come to board. The last Health and Social Care Committee in December was still working up the data for it. So it's going to we've had approval from the Scottish Government for it to go to the 3rd of March Health and Social Care Committee and be published at that point, and then it can come to the next board, so apologies for that.
Any questions or any points for Louise on that? Okay, can we move on to the Argyll and Bute Health and Social Care Partnership? And we have a report in our papers, and I would invite Joanna to speak to it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Boyd. So the Scottish Government, just in the back of Louise's comments here, Scottish Government did give agreement to all partnerships that the submission of these reports could be extended. It's usually August that we have to submit them. So this went to our IGB in November and is coming here. So I suppose just briefly to say that the 3 areas that this relates to are specifically around national health and wellbeing outcome indicators, finance and best value and inspection of services. And one of the helpful things about this being for 1920 is looking back to the improvement that we have made across the whole of Argyll and Bute and NHS Highland that put us in the position at the beginning of COVID to deliver what we have. And I'd like to just highlight a few number of areas that perhaps aren't regularly talked about at the board. Child protection and adult protection are critical areas, and in Argyll and Bute we've got children's services delegated to our partnership. So the delivery of our children and young people service plan has been a key area of work since 1920, following Argyll and Bute being one of the first areas to have children's services undertake a joint inspection at the tail end of 2018. So that really has been the basis of what we've been working towards across children's services. And it's also been the progress that we've made there resulted in 2019 Argyll and Bute be one of 2 HSAPs that were selected by the Scottish Government to lead on the GERFIC leadership programme and help to develop and deliver leadership across a whole range of health and social care, education and all services relating to children's services. So again, that's been a huge area of work that we've been progressing that has led us to a position where children's rights and child poverty are issues that are discussed very regularly within the council and within the partnership. And for our next plan, sadly, we will see for 2021 the real impact of COVID on child poverty and children's rights as well. So a couple of other areas, Telecare Development, we've really progressed that in 1920, and we've since in the last 6 months been, because COVID put a pause, been really developing tech, housing and health forum to ensure that we're really learning from COVID and changing the way that we're working and being innovative. Again, going back to 1920, we made huge progress. It's interesting looking back because you often look at the here and now, but we really had quite significant issues around people delayed in hospital in South Argyll and Bute in particular. And in 1920, we improved our delayed discharge position in occupied bed days and numbers by over 20% in comparison to the previous year. And again, that there were lessons there around how we worked as we moved into COVID, which obviously took a different tact. Just a couple more areas I'd like to highlight. Again, the carer strategy and how we've been working with our communities has been absolutely critical to us, again, in our delivery, our support of individuals and their vulnerabilities during COVID. And that's been a key area that the third sector interface have been working very closely with us in community councils to ensure that we're really sighted on remote and rural across the whole of Argyll and Bute. My second last area, you'll be pleased to know, the Sturrock Review, obviously, has already been mentioned, published in April 2019, and there was a further review commissioned in the spring of last year, and obviously that's been a huge focus. The whole time that I've been in this role, this has been a huge focus around culture, that patience, that resilience, the support from the wider team to continue to challenge behaviours and areas where the way that staff are treated is not the way that we want to be treated ourselves. I'd like to close just on finances. In 1819, the partnership had a circa 280 million budget for health and social care, and the outturn for that year was 6.7 million overspend, of which 3.5 million was related to health. The outturn of 1920 was a significant improvement, where we saw that overspend reduced from 6.7 to 2.5, of which 1.2 was health. And this year, we're projecting that that will improve despite COVID. The disputes with Greater Glasgow and Clyde have been resolved. Again, it feels a wee bit like a history lesson in a way, because these have all been huge factors for so long here. And just hopefully from pages 133 to 137, there's a glossary of terms. I'm really hopeful that they've been helpful for people. So, so thank you. And that's for our report for 1920.
Thank you, Joanna, and I'm sure the new members in particular will have appreciated the glossary that you've provided there, and very encouraging to see the progress that you've made. I think 27 out of 43 targets have been met in the period, and so that's good progress. Pam.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that all board members know the nuance and the difference between the IJB and the lead agency model in relation to these performance reports. So we'll start off with Joanna, the comprehensive story that it tells of the annual activity and the transformation and change that's happened in relation to the 9 national health and wellbeing outcomes is the story that it's pointed at. It's an IJB report. So as a public body in its own right, it's their report, and it's for public accountability for the people of Argyll and Bute to see what's going on in their patch. For us as a board, it's for us to note, it's not for us to approve. That's happened through the IJB. But obviously as partners, as key partners in that arrangement, it's really important for us to be familiar with, and as a system we need to understand operationally that performance and how we support that. So it's a really status document for that new public body in terms of what it's achieved. In terms of lead agency, as a board we will have to approve it for publication, and then it can go to partners as well for information and noting. But again, it's the whole point of these reports is to show the public what we've been doing in relation to those 9 national health and wellbeing outcomes. So they're really important documents, and they hold that very public accountability. You have 4 months usually post as the end of the financial year, just as Joanna said. So for end of August is generally when people get to, because it takes quite a while to get that that report together post your year's performance, and we would want to see North Highland in exactly the same rhythm as going forward as Argyll and Bute. But there's some distinct differences there in accountability that I think is important for everybody to understand.
Yes, as you say, Pam, it's been approved already by the IJB at the November meeting, and Sarah, Jean, Gaynor and I are members of the IJB, so we've had the opportunity to input into that discussion already. Unless anybody else wants to add something at this point, we have to note, we are being asked to note the annual performance report and note the impressive performance report that Joanna has brought to us today. Are you happy to do that? Yes, okay. Thanks, Joanna. It's a pity that we're running short of time to fully consider all of these reports, but we have to move on to the Director of Public Health report and ask Tim to speak to it.
Thank you very much. The Director of Public Health produce annual reports looking at the state of health of the local area, and this is my first for NHS Highland. I started at the start of July, so I suppose it covers half the time that I've been in post in the 6 months beforehand. Public health and public health staff have had the time dominated by COVID, perhaps even more than other staff, and most of the work that it has been is taken up on by public health at the moment is very directly related to COVID. That has meant that two things really regarding this report. One, that there has been less time available to produce the report and to hone it down, or to get to spend time looking at aspects of the content. So perhaps there are elements that we may think, oh well, perhaps too much has been said on this and too little on other things. So I think that's inevitable at the moment. But I think it's important to get the report out, and also important to highlight the issues included in it, which stress, not surprisingly, aspects of the COVID pandemic. It hasn't been included within the papers, and it is still a slightly draft version, but members will have had the opportunity to follow the link to see it. I don't envisage it changing to any extent. And there are three elements that it highlights. First of all, the epidemiology and the background to COVID, although we are only part of the way through, so that will be a continuing story. Also, the continuing story for the second element of the wider effects of COVID. There are lots of wide effects, whether on other conditions and how they're perhaps not being picked up, but the thing focused in the report is on social factors, on things like income, on children, on poverty, on employment, and the importance of developing and implementing social mitigation. And then also a section on alcohol and drugs, and the connection between that agenda and COVID, and the importance of recognising the knock-on effects. So I'll leave it there, and I would welcome any questions now, or given the length of the report, at some time outside, once members have had a chance to digest it.
I know Jean has some questions. Jean, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Boyd, and thank you, Tim, for your report and presentation. My question could actually have been posed at a number of agenda items, and it might be a question that Louise Bussell may wish to comment on also. There was a recent request from Scottish Government that all HSCPs provide a child poverty action plan. At tomorrow's IJB meeting, Joanna will present on the Argyll and Bute Child Poverty Action Plan for 1920, which reflects the impact and compounding effect of COVID-19 on child poverty. My question is, how is this plan progressing so that we can have sight of the Highland Child Poverty Action Plan?
Thank you. My understanding is that it's well in development and will be ready in February or March as part of the Integrated Children's Plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anne?
Sorry, did Louise want to add to that? Louise, was that what you were putting your hand up for, or?
Yeah, it was really just to briefly add that there's been a heck of a lot of work by the council in particular in this area, and there's a great deal of implementation already of the child poverty work, particularly around COVID and how we support families. So certainly from the conversations I've had, I'm quite sure that there is significant work already underway. I'm not going to go into all the bullet points of what they are, but certainly it feels like it's an area that has had a lot of focus, which is really good.
Okay, so it is a very important and interesting report, Tim, so thank you for that. You make a number of recommendations for the board about action that it can take to mitigate the impacts of COVID. As we're only being asked to note the report today and don't have a lot of time to discuss it within the overall agenda, I wondered if you're intending to bring forward a separate, perhaps within the social mitigation plan, for the board to consider those recommendations, or are they already incorporated in our mobilisation plan, or how would you like or expect the board to respond to your recommendations in the report?
Tim?
Thank you. I think largely for the recommendations are covered within the work on the social mitigation plan. So I think there may be ones which will need a separate approach. It's always difficult with a Director of Public Health's report of it being a separate, largely independent report, but also with my role as an executive director on the board. So I'm making recommendations, but to some extent I have the responsibility also to implement, and that's a fundamental tension there. But I think most of them will be covered within the work on social mitigation.
Okay, so, well, I think they are very important recommendations, and I think it would be very useful if, when the board comes to consider the next iteration of our mobilisation plan, that we could spend some time considering to what extent we're able to incorporate the social mitigation actions within our forward-looking activities.
Indeed, yes, yes.
Okay, I have Alex and Pam. Alex.
Thanks, Boyd. Yeah, Tim, thanks for that report. Very, very useful and very detailed. I'm looking at the page 252 and 253 on the key issues, particularly looking at the drug-related deaths, which unfortunately, like most of Scotland, has gone up and gone up considerably. In fact, more than doubled in 6 years by that, and that's 2018. I'm assuming that in 2019 it's gone up again. Scotland's got a real problem, as we know, and we're well aware, especially down in Tayside and some of the city areas. And obviously, the First Minister is taking control of that. Says she's taking control of this. Have we got any input into this, Tim, or is this going to be done to us and imposed upon us as a board, rather than us having some input to how we're going to tackle this?
Okay, I mean, drug-related deaths, and it relates a bit quite considerably to the next report as well. Our performance across NHS Highland is better than across Scotland. I think we have our rate is 0.1 per 1,000 of the population. Scotland as a whole 0.18. However, it's a very significant problem for the whole country. In terms of what we can, what we should be doing, a lot of the work is down to us, and the drug and alcohol work is all in partnership. It's not just a thing for the health board, and a lot of the influence, when we compare to say other parts of the UK, for Scotland drug deaths, is around access to and engagement with services. So there is a lot that we can do in order to get more people engaged with the services, and it's far more likely that there'll be better outcomes if people are fully engaged. So there is a lot that we can do.
Okay, Deirdre, You had your hand up before. Has your question been answered, or do you want to come back in?
No, yes, my question has been answered. I had a number under the social mitigation section, but it fell under Anne's comments, so that's
Okay.
fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Deirdre. Pam.
Yeah, I think you know, both the public health report here and the next report are something that we need to take really seriously as a board and really need to take a step back from. And this really challenges us on where we want to go in the future. And this is actually the kind of heart of the discussion that we were having at a national meeting yesterday, and in terms of the widening gap of inequalities that will prevail from all the the impacts of what COVID has done to us. And I think that does challenge us with, so where do we think we're going? And as we remobilise, I think, and you're right to bring up the remobilisation plan, but as we remobilise, we really need to start challenging ourselves about where that's actually taken us, and whether that indeed is going to take us in the right direction, or whether we're really taking account of the here and now struggles that people will be having in our communities, and what that will do ultimately to their health and well-being. And you know, the drug-related deaths, and any death, whether it's a suicide or drug-related death, that's somebody's child, isn't it? That's somebody's sister, that's somebody's brother, whatever, and it's one death too many. And you know, I guess that's the attitude I'd be hoping that we would be having, that you know, that's just not, it's just not good enough, albeit you know, we can't prevent everything from not being right, but we definitely, as a you know, one of the biggest employers in the region, as one of the strong organisations, public sector organisations in the region, we need to have a very strong stance around this, just as has been said, not just individually, but as strong partners in how we support communities and connect with them to you know, try and carve out a different future. And that probably does mean a question to us on how much recognition we actually have of inequalities when we're having our discussions, how much our reports reflect our understanding of that and our plans, and how important prevention is to us. And so it really flips us in terms of where we can often find our focus into a different space. But I think, you know, my belief, and I know I'm not alone in that, is that if we really want to forge a different path forward, and we want to, you know, really get into that space, it doesn't mean our acute hospital, our elective care and all that's not important, but actually fundamentally, what's the path we're creating for the future? And that starts with children, it starts with transitions for young people, it starts with the resilience that lives within individuals and at communities level. And I think, Boyd, you said about, you know, maybe repeating the presentation that Carol from Fife, Caroline from Grampian and myself did yesterday, and a development session. I think that would be really worthy, and I would really encourage you to look at some of the early studies that have been done on COVID and the impact, and I'm sure, you know, Tim's report is very much in tune with that, but it really speaks to, you know, a deteriorating well-being profile for the people of Scotland and the other countries, and one of inequalities that we need to think long and hard about. So whether your mental well-being is affected by the fact that you are waiting on a hip replacement and in huge pain, or whether it's because you have grief because you've lost somebody and weren't able to say goodbye, or whether you have got really severe issues in your social circumstances that lead you to suicide. You know, there's a whole range, and I think we need to really have a good discussion as a board about what that means for us and what we think our role is in that. I think it's a very poignant time for us to think about how we truly look at diversity and inequalities and go forward in the right direction for the future.
Thanks, Pam. And finally on this item, Bert.
Thanks, Boyd. I suppose in some ways it links into what Pam has just said about inequalities and prevention and well-being. And when I was reading the papers previously, I can't remember, it was Tim's report on public health, or it was about the ADP report, but it was in relation to our policy in making representation to liquor licensing applications, and it struck me that we were kind of selective in the applications that we made representation on, and it seemed to be perhaps dictated to the applications for maybe just off sales licenses. But I think it's quite a complex query, and it might be better if I had the conversation offline with Tim, given the pressures that we're under just now for time. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. And Tim, would you want to round this item off?
Yeah, well, to thank everybody for the contributions. I'm certainly very happy to take that particular item offline. What Pam has said regarding the health inequalities issue and the crucial importance of that for the future of health across NHS Highland.
Thanks. A very interesting, very informative and very thought-provoking report, Tim, and it deserves further consideration, as Anne has indicated, and I think maybe we could do that in conjunction with the session we propose on Pam's presentation and our colleagues' presentation yesterday. So something maybe at a development session further down the line that we can have a deeper conversation about it. Back to you, Tim, for the next item, Alcohol and Drug Partnership Report.
Thank you very much. The Alcohol and Drug Partnerships are multi-agency bodies very closely associated with the Health Board, but not part of the board. And the reports and strategies are brought today for noting, perhaps for comment, and perhaps mostly to spark future discussion about the importance of drugs and alcohol for the health and for health inequalities. The reports are somewhat different and reflect the different developments in the two alcohol and drug partnerships. I think this is the first time that the Argyll and Bute report has been brought to the board. It normally simply goes to the IJB, but it's important that both reports are brought. They've already been submitted to Scottish Government, but I think they offer both the reports and the strategies offer a very useful insight for us to see how the picture of alcohol and drug use stands across NHS Highland and what activities are being done, and also how COVID, picking up on the public health report, how COVID relates to those. So the reports are simply here for noting, but I'd be very happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay, some people have submitted some questions already. I think do you want to raise these just now? Anybody? I think we had Gaynor, you had some questions.
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to take these outside the meeting. It was really just reflecting on the pandemic and the fact that these strategies are for 2020 to 2023, and how the pandemic might be reflected in the strategies going forward, because I'm assuming there's some change in the way that services are working and being delivered. But I'm happy to take that outside.
Okay. Any other contributions then, Anne?
I was just to say my question was answered in the previous item, Boyd.
Right.
So but I know that Pam is engaged in discussions at the moment about how and where we report within NHS Highland on this work. And I think that will be very useful in terms of making sure we're cited on it in the right places. And I look, because I agree, I think it's very important that we are able to have more of a focus throughout the organisation on this topic going forward, and also look forward to having discussions on this and the previous report as well within our community planning structures, because clearly, as Tim has said, it's very much a partnership effort. This.
Okay, thanks, Anne. Sarah and then Pam.
Thank you, Boyd. Just a very quick comment, not to diminish the immense distress and challenges that have been brought about by the pandemic, but I suppose just reflecting locally on very small, tight-knit communities, I think there are some opportunities to be realised through increased remote and digital engagement that I think could be of real benefit in places where seeking help can be sometimes very difficult. But I'm happy to take a discussion offline with Tim about that.
Pam?
Yeah, I was just going to talk a bit about, just very briefly about the governance, but just to go back to what Sarah said there, absolutely. And in a position where lots of people want to talk about these issues anonymously, you know, the remote consultation gives a far greater privacy than pitching up to centres that become labelled. So a huge amount can be done there. In terms of the governance, when the IGBs were created, the new framework suggested or put reporting of ADPs into IGBs, and that kind of makes it a little bit complicated, or we need to work out in the lead agency again how that can be managed, because obviously we have got children's services predominantly in one area and adult in another, and actually ADP's work is far reaching, and actually historically sat in community planning, which was a good place for it to report into, because you've got a much wider partnership. But of course it's not a public body, so I'm proposing that with the IGBs being established, that was the rationale for changing in the thinking. But I think we can map that out in a sensible way that means it supports the activity of the ADP. The ADP, more importantly, feels it actually is somewhere that it is owning it. I'll try and get that done over the next week or two with Conrad and other people that are very interested, obviously, around this agenda.
Anything finally from you, Tim?
No. I need to say that I'm very happy to have discussions outside the meeting, and that the important elements of this will no doubt be discussed at many future meetings.
Okay, clearly there are a lot of important issues flagged up in these reports, so it would be good to have them aired again. But for the moment, we're just being asked to note the reports, and I take it we're happy to do so. On to item 15, the Code of Corporate Governance, which has been before us previously, and this is an updated version, and I ask Ruth to just say a few words of introduction.
Thank you, Boyd. Yeah, I've not got anything additional to the paper that's there in front of you. This is the Code of Corporate Governance that has been updated since September last year. All of the governance committees have had an opportunity to review their own terms of reference and to consider the draft code. There's been a number of changes and revisions made since that time, and the basis of the Code of Corporate Governance was agreed at the Audit Committee on 8th December, subject to one or two additional revisions that were highlighted at that time. The document in front of you has been amended to take account of our withdrawal from the EU, so some of the terminology has been changed in the standing financial instructions and standards of business conduct for staff. And it will be reviewed annually and presented to the board at each meeting in January, with a view to committees looking at their element of it throughout the year, and the audit committee giving its final sanction to it in its December meeting. So it's here for your approval. To note that it will also be uploaded onto the board's website as well.
Are you happy to approve? Yes. Albert, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just a point for accuracy's sake, really, Boyd. In reading the document, I noticed in page 112 there's inconsistency in reference to the Culture Programme Board and the Culture Oversight Group. So I think it would be better if that was updated to refer to the Culture Oversight Group. And also on page 135, it refers to, I won't go into detail of it, but it refers to dates which actually are in the past. So perhaps that could be either updated or removed, but I'll leave it with you. Thank you.
Okay, and if there are any similar points, could you please submit them to Ruth for noting and for amendment? But with that in mind, can we approve the document and commend it to our new board members for bedtime reading, possibly? Item 16, governance and other committee assurance reports, beginning with clinical governance. And can I ask each chair to be as brief as possible, starting with Gaynor.
Thank you, Chair. We have the meeting minutes for the 1st of December meeting. We also met on the 14th of January, so apologies that that meeting minute isn't with you. The one thing I would like to escalate from that meeting is that the Area Drugs and Therapeutics Committee highlighted a lack of clarity over which groups were responsible for the review of non-medicine related clinical policy and guidelines, adding that this could pose a risk to both patients and staff. So currently an appropriate solution is being sought, and we're due to have an update at Clinical Governance Committee around July. Thank you. Thank you,
Gaynor. Anybody want to ask anything about the minutes? In which case we move on to Anne and the draft Highland Health and Social Care Committee minutes.
Well, just hopefully everybody will have picked up from Ruth's email that unfortunately the original version circulated was an old version. So I hope everybody's had a chance to note the updated version of the minutes. I don't really have anything to add or to highlight at this time, Boyd. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. Ruth, did you want to come in?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to comment that I believe that Sandra McRory was actually in attendance at your meeting, Anne, and I believe that she's not actually listed as in attendance. So we can change that if that's the case.
I don't think, it's not my recollection that she was present, and she wouldn't normally attend. She was present at our last board meeting, I believe, but
okay, I'll check that with her. Maybe it's my misunderstanding. I got a message to that effect, so I'll check that with her. If that's not the case, then I'll leave it.
I mean, perhaps Louise has a better memory than I have, but
can we maybe deal with that offline, possibly? Alistair.
Yes, thank you. Yep, thank you, Boyd. I think there are only two things I want to draw to members' attention. Three things. You should have all received the internal audit report on culture that we asked to be circulated. So I hope you all received that. The second thing is the GDPR situation. The internal audit report still had some items outstanding. If they're not finalised or completed by the next audit committee, we'll probably be escalating the report to be discussed at the board level because it's an important issue. And the final point was we were making excellent progress on the outstanding management actions and the feedbacks to that. However, the second lockdown came along and has really scuppered that and set it back a bit. So I have circulated last week to the committee chairs a list of their own outstanding actions so they can see them. But really we need the executive leadership team to pick up the pace on this and get as many cleared out by the year end as possible, as it often features as a major factor in previous Section 22 reports that are presented. So just a plea for some attention in these difficult times to be focused onto that, to get them cleared out would be very helpful. Thank you, Boyd.
Thanks, Alistair. Area Clinical Forum, Margaret. Is Margaret with us?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I was struggling to get my mute button off. Thanks for that, Boyd. Yes, we have minutes from the 29th of October and I don't have anything to add to them. We did meet on the 14th of January and just one particular issue that was discussed. We had a presentation from Professor Sandra McCreary from UHI, and it was a really helpful insight into the opportunities for joint working between UHI and obviously NHS Highland. There is a lot of work obviously that goes on already and there's investment there, but there was very much a feeling from the ACF that a lot of staff don't really currently have an awareness or an understanding of what the opportunities are, and they're quite immense. It was really quite an eye-opening presentation. So it was just really mention that and the potential, ask about the potential to have some kind of event in NHS Highland that would really open up awareness very broadly to all groups of staff, multidisciplinary, around what the art of the possible might be in terms of research opportunities and also opportunities to engage in supporting training and education for our staff. Because I think, you know, if you're in a leadership role, you're aware of it. I wasn't aware of all the opportunities, but I think for staff on the ground, it's something that if we could do a very broad conference or event virtually, I expect, probably not this year, maybe at the beginning of next year, but something that would really open up the doors there and perhaps lead to the development of or the refreshing, I'm not sure what's there in terms of strategy between us as organisations, but an opportunity to develop something that's stronger and really leads towards better joint working. There's huge potential in terms of recruitment and retention of staff, I think, for developing courses, growing our own staff, all that kind of thing. So I felt it was quite an important issue to raise.
Thanks, Margaret.
Sorry, broke up there. Is that for me to come in?
Yes, sorry, Pam.
Yeah, that's all right. Yes, I've just to give assurance, I've met twice now with Sandra. Last week was the second one, and the discussion was absolutely around that and how we can get some sort of clear protocol. And I know there are others in the exec team involved, so I just need to do a bit of checking. There is actually a conference due next year, so all that you're saying, Margaret, is definitely a conversation that I've been having with her, and see if we can get that a little bit more shaped up and get a connection, as you say, with the board and be clear about where we're going.
Okay, and finally, under this item, the Argyll and Butte IJB draft minutes of 25 November, Sarah.
Thank you, Boyd. I actually don't have anything to add that members will not have been able to figure out for themselves from the minutes. And of course, we had the performance report earlier on, which gives a huge amount of detail. I suppose maybe just to point out to our newer members, we're always a little bit out of sync with the IGB. So our IGB always takes place the day after this board meeting. So our next meeting is tomorrow. So therefore the minutes are always a little bit out of sync. But if people have any questions about the IGB, new members, if you want to email me, then go for it.
Thanks, Sarah. And finally, AOCB, is there anything that anybody wants to raise at this juncture? Our next meeting is on the 30th of March. I don't wish to close before thanking all our staff. I already thanked Tim and his cohort, but I also want to thank, as Tim indicated, the cross-specialty, cross-working that's gone on to meet the challenges of the COVID pandemic, and that involves everybody in the organisation at all different levels. And I would like to thank each and every one who has contributed to our response to what has been a really demanding period, particularly in the last month or so on that front. So Pam in particular has been kept very busy with her hand on the tiller, and she used a boat analogy yesterday, so I'm allowed to use another one there. But just to thank you and your team, your executive team, Pam, for leading us in such a well-organized way with the command structure through all the challenges that have been thrown at you by the pandemic, and not just by that pandemic, by other aspects of our business. So a big thank you from your colleagues on the board to you for all that you have done.
Thank you.
And with that, I want to draw the meeting to conclusion, and also to thank our press and public colleagues who have stayed with us for the duration of the meeting, and apologies for overrunning. We are due to have another meeting. Could I suggest we meet at 2:15? Would that give people time to have a little bit of lunch before we have our in-committee meeting, which will not be a long meeting, I promise you. So 2:15, back then.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Chair. Bye.